Hi, man.
What are you doing?
I'm drinking wine and eating cheese and catching some rays, you know.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Yes, we'll reel around the flag, boys will reel it once again, shouting a battle cry of freedom. We will reel it from the hillside, all together from the plain, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah! Down with the traitors, up with the stars. We will reel around the flag, boys, and reel it once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
All right, it's a little bit earlier than usual, but here we are, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time has come around for another edition, the 68th edition, in fact, of Uncut History. Welcome, everybody. I'm sure some of our usual chat members will be joining us in about a half hour. There's no special reason on why I'm starting a half hour early, except, I don't know, man, to quote a coworker of mine, I'm dragging ass, man. I don't know why. I've just been fading all afternoon and evening. Good news, I had the day off. I didn't really get anything productive done today other than go and get a second look at a certain movie, which we may or may not talk about later on. Really has no involvement on what we're going to talk about tonight. But first, let's check in on the chat. Let's see. We got As Burnett. Thank you for joining in. The flag is proudly flying on the land and on the main. Indeed, indeed. Yes, and the ghost of Howard's right arm is always haunting the chat. Well, if I could double check my calendar. Oh, yes. This past Monday was the 160th anniversary of the Battle of Atlanta. Not to be confused with the overall Atlanta campaign. Of course, the Battle of Atlanta being a critical part of the wider campaign. But I'm just going to kind of spoil our tonight's talk right out the get-go and say the Battle of Atlanta, this is not the battle that decided the fate of Atlanta during the American Civil War. But it is a very important battle in the American Civil War, nevertheless, and a very important moment to be depicted in a piece of artwork. And we're going to talk all about that, hopefully, before the stream's over. Hopefully, West Penn Powell doesn't, cut me off like they did last week. Knock on wood. What? Oh, the evil one wants attention. Well, nah. You're being too evil. That's not how you get attention. You don't get attention by being okay. Well, technically, if you're a politician, yeah, you do get a lot of attention by being evil. In any case, you're not a politician, Lily, because the world would be run far more efficiently if you were in power. You only want simple things such as treats. We'd have a cat treat economy if you were the POTUS or the king or some crap like that. All right, so we're talking about the Battle of Atlanta, which means we're jumping back into a conversation we had a few weeks ago when we were covering the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, as that's covered in the same general time period, the same Atlanta campaign. And I do have a lovely slideshow, which I totally did not whip up together this morning for tonight's stream. Yes, Battle of Atlanta, episode 68. Boy, we've come far. All right, as a quick recap, I think I've restated as a zillion times this year on Uncut History. Crap, no, Retracing History, that's Saturday. Uncut Histories are Thursdays. Previously on Uncut History, we discussed the Overland Campaign and part of the Atlanta Campaign, two vital military operations undertaken by the Union states during the American Civil War in the spring and summer months of 1864. 1864 is an election year in the United States of America, and for a country that's been torn apart for several years now since the last election, well, everything is up for grabs. This is the turning point for the Civil War. Will the Lincoln administration be able to overcome adversity, keep in power in the Union states, and destroy the Confederate States of America? Or shall the Confederacy be able to find for some nook, some crook, some way where they have enough on the bargaining table to argue for their own independence, albeit limited or outright from the United States of America? Well, we've spent several live streams talking about what Ulysses S. Grant was doing in the Eastern Theater in 1864. That was the Overland Campaign. Let's see what his good friend William Tecumseh Sherman's doing out west. Well, since we last left off, we talked about the battles of Chattanooga, November of last year, which opened a gateway right toward Atlanta, Georgia. And why is Atlanta, Georgia so important? I mean, on paper, it's not a very big city. Only about 9,000 people live in Atlanta, Georgia during the time of the American Civil War. It's not even the largest city in Georgia. I think Savannah had like almost 20,000 people living over on the coast. So what is Atlanta's importance? Railroads. And as you can see, Sherman admiring that map of Atlanta around the time of the American Civil War, you're going to notice 3 railroads forming a massive Y. That's railroad lingo for, a kind of a interchange of railroads in the middle of that map. Those are the, I heard FUDs. I get distracted when I hear FUDs. You never know what Fred, the special cat, the curiosity cat, can be up to sometimes. Anyways, there's 3 major railroads that connect in at Atlanta. And should you control Atlanta, Georgia, you really have the heart of the Confederate States of America in the palm of your hand. So, Sherman can sound like Bray Wyatt and go, he got the whole world in his hands, he got a slave holding states in his hands. So, that's Sherman's goal, and Sherman got quite the firepower to achieve it. He doesn't have an army. He has an army group coming down bearing upon Atlanta, Georgia. And throughout the spring and early summer of 1864, the only thing between Atlanta, Georgia, and William Tecumseh Sherman is the Army of Tennessee under the charge of General Joe Johnston. It's the main Confederate fighting force between Atlanta and Union forces marching out of Tennessee into northern Georgia. Joe Johnston favored Fabian tactics, which was blocking Sherman and not trying to bring on a general fight unless he absolutely had to. I don't know. That was almost like a Y2K moment in my conscience. I think it was pretty destructive. Oh, speaking of destructive, Fred's trying to cling on my leg. Yeah, the curiosity cat. And now the evil one's angry because the curiosity one wants attention. Well, you're mean when you want attention. And now he's going to destroy my computer bag for my troubles. Let's go back to that question. Am I okay? Let's be honest. If you were subscribed here to Readout Productions, does that imply that I'm okay? I feel like everybody follows me to see what crazy stuff is going to come out of my mouth sometimes. Okay, so Joe Johnston, the commander of the Confederate Army of Tennessee, his main goal throughout the spring of 1864 is block Sherman's advance on Atlanta and kind of force Sherman to attack him. Johnston does not want to take any big risks, so he's trying to find good defensible ground, dig in, and basically try to egg Sherman into a battle. Sherman, more often than not, is not willing to do so, constantly outflanking Johnston. However, in late June, there is a very bloody fight on Kennesaw Mountain, where Sherman thought he had a chance to completely disintegrate the Army of Tennessee. However, it turned out they were very well entrenched on Kennesaw Mountain. In any case, though, Sherman and his Union Army group were able to outflank Johnston once again, and essentially, Confederate President Jefferson Davis told Johnston, "Don't do it. Don't cross the Chattahoochee River. Don't do it without a fight. Come on. Got to lose at least one man before you want to cross that Chattahoochee River." Johnston draws across the Chattahoochee River, the last water barrier between Sherman, the Confederate Army, in Atlanta, Georgia, without much of a fight. And now Sherman is crossing the Chattahoochee River and is within easy reach of Atlanta, Georgia. Davis to say is none too enthused. And that's going to bring us to this.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell and adieu, you ladies of Spain.
I don't know. That was an accurate depiction of Jefferson Davis saying farewell to Joe Johnston. Joe Johnston I think it's July 17th. If not, it's definitely the 18th. On July 17th, 1864, Joe Johnston is relieved of commanding the Army of Tennessee and is replaced by John Bell Hood. Now, I want to put on these two stats to show you the power dynamic, the paradigm shift that has happened in the Army of Tennessee. Joe Johnston was 57 years old with 35 years of experience in the military, going back being involved with the United States military before the American Civil War. And while he was involved in the first major land battle of the American Civil War, Bull Run, leading to a Confederate victory, he really hasn't had the best battlefield reputation since then. Now, the Peninsula Campaign of 1862, of course, is a Confederate victory. The reason I label it as a defeat is for Johnston personally. Johnston is wounded midway through the Peninsula Campaign during a battle the Confederacy lost, the Battle of Fair Oaks. And this is going to lead to Robert E. Lee taking charge of the Army of North Virginia and going on his, what I call, the miracle year, where he's just able to outwit the Union Army forces around Washington, D.C. for almost 12 months, time and time again. And everybody kind of just forgets about Johnston, like he's an old toy or an older pet or something. It's really sad on it. It's really depressing how the Confederacy handled Johnston, because he is a military, he's a military leader, one of the leading military figures in the United States for the war. And he's just kind of forgotten by the Confederacy for Robert E. Lee. He will be called out of his office to go take charge of the Vicksburg campaign, but he'll never actually get to the city of Vicksburg. He'll be turned back at Jackson, Mississippi. So that's another defeat, because when Vicksburg surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant, that kind of gives all the Mississippi River over to the Union. And then I have the big defeat in the Atlanta campaign. He was unsuccessful in stopping Sherman's advance on Atlanta. So he's replaced by a man, his junior, John B. Hood, only 33 years old, making him the youngest Army commander on either side during the American Civil War, at least when we're talking about proper armies. He has, to be fair, he has 11 years of military experience, but less than half of what Johnston has. Why is Davis picking Hood of all the people? Because if you're familiar with the Army of Tennessee, if you've been following our streams about the Heartland campaign of 1862, about the battles for Chattanooga in 1863, and the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain in 1864, you know about men such as Benjamin Cheatham and William Hardy. William Hardy quite literally wrote the manual on the military in mid-19th century America. Why not pick those folks? Well, there's a score of reasons I do not have time to get into. I actually got to fish out my old college article. It's a historiography on Braxton Bragg, and I kind of became a bit of a defender of Braxton Bragg because there's a lot of politics that involve the personalities of Hardy, Bragg, Davis, Cheatham, all of them. The Army of Tennessee was just set up. It was a self-destructive force that went on for 3 horrific years. And Sherman and Grant and Thomas watched on with popcorn going, oh, this is some deplorable crap. Thank goodness we're on that side. So yeah, Hood's brought in because he's much younger than Johnson. This is Jefferson Davis trying to inject some young juice into the Confederacy, especially in 1864 when it looks like it's teetering on the point of collapse. Hood also has a lot of battlefield heroics that are already even known in 1864, let alone talked about today. He was known for his involvement in the Confederate victory at Gaines Mill, Confederate victory at Second Bull Run, albeit a stalemate, but he did a vital stance during the Battle of Antietam, Confederate victory at Fredericksburg. Yes, Gettysburg is a Confederate defeat, but Hood is very famous for his division going in and assaulting around the Devil's Den, the slaughter pen, and the base of Little Round Top area. Though he will actually be wounded during that action, he actually loses the use of his arm. He's actually going to use the use of one of his arms. I think it's his left arm. Ghost of Howard's right arm. You know about limbs and being lost and disabled in the French in the. Well, I never said French and Indian. You nearly made me say French and Indian War with your comment. Can you by any chance confirm for me which appendages does Hood lose the service for? In any case, Hood loses the service of an arm at Gettysburg, comes back and is involved in the Battle of Chickamauga in northern Georgia, where he's going to be shot in the leg, and he'll lose his leg. It'll have to be amputated. So, though he is very he has youth compared to Johnston. I don't know, by 1864, and this is an actual photograph of Hood in 1864, I don't know if he got all that youthful drive in him anymore. There's also a long-running myth that he was overdrugged during the American Civil War, especially after his 2 wounds, and that the drugging severely impacted his leadership capabilities. I did some digging on that a couple years ago for a video about the Battle of Franklin, which may or may not encourage you to go watch after this. They've recently, it was like 2016, they recently rediscovered the journals of Hood's personal physician. And by all accounts, the drugs that he was given there was nothing different of the level of drugs Hood's given to any other individual during the American Civil War. At least somebody who is suffering from a leg amputation and needs something like morphine. He wasn't dosed any higher than the average dosage. And in fact, it was comparatively lower, I think, than the average dosage. Point is, they rediscovered his physician's journals recently, and it kind of disproves the whole myth that the reason Hood suffers such catastrophic defeats is because he was drugged up. So, and I think that's kind of a disservice to, well, I think if we were able to confirm that he was too drugged up at this point, that would be a blessing for him. A blessing, say, well, he didn't have the ability to control the situation. The truth is he did have control over the situation, which makes him all the more accountable for what's about to happen later in his career. But right now, he's just got in power. He's rejuvenating the Army of Tennessee, who are stuck in the fences of Atlanta, and he got a plan. And the reason Davis put Hood in charge of the Army of Tennessee is because Hood's known for being aggressive. Some may say full-on reckless. But in this situation, that is kind of what the Army of Tennessee needs. They need somebody who's willing to break out of the Union vice around Atlanta. Oh, don't know which it was, but lost it early in the advance. Left arm says to Google. All right, we'll take that. That would make sense. Yes, I want to say I know it was right thigh that I always remember hearing about the right thigh because they amputate below the right thigh. So that would make sense. Yeah. So he had his arm in a sling because he couldn't really use it anymore. He lost all nerves in it, controlled the nerves in it. And then he's lacking his right leg. They had him strapped to a horse, though. That is true. Like the commanding office of it. Sorry, guys. Like I said, that's why I started to stream early because I knew I was starting to get a little tired and want to get this done with. So they had to strap the Army commander of the Army of Tennessee into a horse. Like he couldn't get in it himself. That's the situation we're in. That's the situation the Confederate States of America are in, summer of 1864. But don't worry, Hood got what Kevin Bacon and Tremors would say, a goddamn plan. And his goddamn plan is actually what Johnston was already planning to do, but the Davis administration wouldn't want you to know that. Essentially, what Hood's going to do is going to make a massive attack on a Union army that's located on Peachtree Creek, north of Atlanta itself. And this is the Army of the Cumberland, commanded by George Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga. So this is kind of like a immovable force. Yeah, immovable force made in the. I can't even do the WrestleMania free quote. I'm that far gone. So. Immovable force, immovable object. Is that it? Did I do it right? I probably did it wrong. Anyways, Hood on July 20th, 1864 is going to launch an assault with 2 of the corps of his own army against Thomas's Union army along Peachtree Creek. It does not go well. There's miscommunication amongst Hood and Cheatham and Hardy and Stewart. The latter three are the Free Corps commanders of the Army of Tennessee. And essentially what happens is the Army of Tennessee spread their battle line too thin to deal with other threats to the east from other Union forces. Remember, Sherman commands an army group. There's free Union Army laying siege to Atlanta at this time. You got Schofield's Army of the Ohio. You got the already mentioned Army of the Cumberland, and you got the Army of the Tennessee moving more to the east. They're going to be some of our main characters later on. So Battle Peachtree Creek ensues. Doesn't go well for Hood. He does bloody the Army of the Cumberland, don't get me wrong, but the battle lines stay as they have been for the past few days. And it's around this point, I believe, that Sherman begins the bombardment of Atlanta itself, if I'm not mistaken. I think that runs July 20th through mid to late August, where it's like 40 consecutive days of bombardment on the city. It is brutal for the citizens inside. But don't worry, Hood's going to get his second swing. So on the next day after the Battle of Peachtree Creek, he believes that the Union left flank wrapping around Atlanta, Georgia, is actually exposed. And it's exposed near the vicinity of Bald Hill. And now this is a kind of a ridge line, actually, more than just simply a hill. It's kind of a bit of a ridge line that overlooks the Georgia Railroad and Decatur Wagon Road. So we're looking to the northeast of Atlanta now. So both this wagon road and railroad parallel each other as they leave Atlanta to the east, past Bald Hill, and head toward Decatur, Georgia. And since Sherman's trying to strangle the Army of Tennessee and force them to submit in Atlanta, he's trying to cut off each of the free rail lines. We already got possession of one, the Western Atlantic Railroad. That's what he's moved down from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now he's moving east. He's moving his forces to the east of Atlanta to cut off the Georgia Railroad and then potentially, complete the trap by swinging in on either the east, west, or if not the both sides to take out one final railroad and complete the entrapment. Hood wants to avoid that happening. He must keep the Georgia Railroad open. And to keep the Georgia Railroad open also gives him an opportunity, he thinks, to outflank the Army of the Tennessee, the Union Army of the Tennessee. So Hood on July 21st is going to send out Cleburne's division of Hardee's Corps, as well as some Confederate cavalry under command of Joseph Wheeler to try to claim that Bald Hill that overlooks the railroad and the wagon road. However, no sooner did they arrive and they try to dig in, they discover that the area is not remote. There are Union forces in the area. Elements of the 17th Union Corps storm the hilltop, driving the Confederates off into a wooded area. And the Union are going to do work trying to improve whatever the Confederates will start digging in up on Bald Hill. However, Hood is not deterred. He thinks that he still has this chance that if he's like, if I just send the entire Army of Tennessee to attack Bald Hill, we'll be able to smash the Union left flank, uproot them. Maybe we can isolate the Army of the Tennessee and defeat them in detail, or we can, force Sherman off my back, force Sherman to move to the east, which will give me access back to the west. Maybe I could get back in Tennessee. Do something. He's hoping by taking Bald Hill, he's going to force Sherman to stop putting pressure on Atlanta, essentially. So he is going to send the Confederate Corps of William Hardee on a 12-mile march to outflank the Union left and assault it the next morning. Now that's going to require Hardee, who's already positioned north of Atlanta, to move through the streets of Atlanta, move to the southeast for a little while before cutting north again so he can get to the east of Bald Hill and presumably be behind the rear of the Union Army of the Tennessee. However, the commander of the Army of the Tennessee, a guy by the name of General James B. McPherson, he's aware. Can I say all was good in the Hood? I don't know. About that Hood, I don't know if all was good. I feel that all was good in Hood's mind. Well, he was a little bit love struck with a Southern belle that he kept writing to, and the Southern belle just absolutely had no affection for him. Instead, she had pity. Anyways. So this brings us to the Army of Tennessee the Tennessee commander, James B. McPherson. Now, James B. McPherson, as well as George Thomas, and I think Schofield even, they're all called together. They're having regular meetings with their boss, Sherman. And around this time, Sherman he's seeing Hood's troops moving. He's seeing Confederate forces moving north to south through the streets of Atlanta because they're on high ground northeast of the city. So, Sherman's looking down his binoculars. And he presumes Hood is actually evacuating Atlanta, or at the very least trying to attack him try to break out on the west side. However, McPherson as well as Thomas both warn Sherman that Hood is known to be very aggressive. And that's because McPherson actually went to West Point along with John Bell Hood. So they're classmates. They know each other pretty decently. So he knows when Hood is moving, and it doesn't mean he's retreating. He's not giving up after one fight. Something's up here. Something's fishy. And for that reason, McPherson's going to have the troops he had already sent out to Bald Hill that day, which was Manning Forces Brigade, to start digging in because something fierce is coming their way. And early on the morning, July 22nd, he's also going to send a division of the 16th Corps to extend the left flank. So the Army of Tennessee, their battle line, it's kind of, actually, I think I have a map. Yep. Well, that's a battle map. I don't think, yeah, that's a battle map. That works out. You can see the blue. You can see the blue. That's the Army of Tennessee battle line. If you're looking north on the map, then you would start seeing elements of, you'd see some artillery. Sherman's headquarters was up there. And eventually you'd start then, if you move north of Atlanta, you'd start seeing the Army of the Cumberland still in position. So that's part of the problem. Sherman has an army group, not just one massive army. And these armies individually are staying in their own quadrants, west, north, and east of Atlanta. There are gaps in the line of the army group. They're operating on their own initiative, just kind of checking in with Sherman, just to tell them what's going on their front. And this is what Hood is trying to exploit, that he can try to trap the Army of Tennessee and defeat it and destroy it in detail or uproot it, get it off of the Georgia Railroad, do something, since they're quite a distance away from immediate reinforcement from Thomas. Now, about that forced march that Hardee's Corps had to make. Hardee's Corps on the evening of July 21st, going into the early hours of July 22nd, as I mentioned, they're enduring like a 12-plus mile march. And it's nighttime. And they're marching through some very thick part of wilderness to the east of Atlanta. Remember, Atlanta's not a big city like it is today. For the record, everywhere where this battle occurs is now urban sprawl. It was not that way in 1864. Oh, no. Oh, no. He's worse than a war criminal. He's a simp. Oh, no. Oh, no. So they're walking through this very forested portion of the Atlanta area. That's not something you'd hear about today. And they have no idea where they're going in the dark, essentially. Their guides are misleading them. It's also still very hot and humid, even at nighttime, because keep in mind, it's July in Georgia. So these men are greatly fatigued. I'm sure they're dehydrated, some, if not most of them. There's at one point I read about an aide to a general got so ticked off of one of their guides that they drew a pistol on the guide and threatened to kill them if they didn't get them to the scene of battle in a hurry. By the time Hardee's Corps gets into position, it's 11 a.m. on July 22nd. They're in broad daylight. And although visibility is very hard to see, I feel that the Union are starting to figure out what's happening. They're going to start seeing occasional glints of muskets. If there's a break in the trees, they're definitely going to start seeing dust rising, from the tree line, from all these troops moving around constantly. So McPherson's becoming all the more alarmed that some type of enemy pressure is building on his left flank. Now, when the Hardee's Corps finally steps off to attack, it's around noon on July 22nd. Oh, that just reminds me how hot it must have been. Oh, those poor men. Those poor men. I had to take that water break. Apologize. That just kind of happened. So around noon, Hardee's Corps launches their attack on what they think is going to be an exposed Union left flank. Not quite what they thought. As they're going to advance into the vicinity of what's known as Sugar Creek, which is, let's say it's about let's look back at that map. what would you say? About, if I can see the measurements. Looks like it's about a mile to the east of Bald Hill. So about a mile east of Bald Hill, there's Sugar Creek, the right half of Hardy's Corps, which that's going to be the divisions of Bates and Walkers. They think they're going to walk right into the rear, and they're going to have to do an about face, well, a quarter face to their left and charge into the rear of the Army of Tennessee. In reality, as we mentioned earlier, McPherson in that morning has been shuffling troops to extend the left flank. So instead of just being a straight line, McPherson has now made an L on his left flank. Get it? L, left. Wow. I'm sure he was thinking about that at the moment. Nothing was good with Hood except when he was division commander under Longstreet, says Andrew Jackson himself. I can't dispute it. Jackson himself has said it, that nothing good comes from Hood. So the rightmost divisions of Hardy's Corps that are attacking, they meet elements of the Union 16 Corps up on this like ridge line overlooking Peach Creek. So you're going through very forested, sometimes swampy terrain, and have to sail a small ridge. And those 16 Corps guys, I'm sure, have built some temporary breastworks that morning. It is a crap fest for Bates and Walker. The right flank of Hardy's Corps is stalled. I've only heard about the 5th Kentucky and some Floridians actually getting up onto the high ground and meeting the Union head on. Most of them are stuck down by the creek or driven back into the woods. There's also very good Union artillery gunners up on top of this ridgeline, pouring fire upon Bates and Walker's Confederate division. So they're stalled. They don't get anywhere. And at one point, when one of the a States Rights Gets brigade starts to falter and starts to fall back, Major General Walker is going to ride right into, by the way, there is a brigade commander in the Army of Tennessee whose name is literally States Rights Gets. He has one of the coolest names of the American Civil War. Anyways, as Gist Brigade's falling back, Walker rides in to try to rally them. His horse is killed. Walker falls to the ground. He tries to stand back up, and he's shot through the lungs and killed. And he'll be one of the major deaths during the Battle of Atlanta, and it's only getting started. So let's move a little bit down the Hardy's Confederate battle line. So clearly, this is not going to be a simple outflanking maneuver. We're now fighting Union forces head on. But if we move to the left flank of Hardy's Corps, we're now dealing with Cleburne's division, as well as Manny's division. Sorry about that. Yeah, Cleburne's division and Manny's division, they're on Hardy's left flank, and they're kind of going right toward Bald Hill. Cleburne's division is going to discover, although McPherson has successfully sent some Union reinforcements to extend the Union left flank into an L shape, there are still gaps in that L. And just to the east of Bald Hill, there's actually a bit of a ravine that is completely unprotected. Pretty wide gap, too, in the Union line. And Texans under Cleburne's division are going to pour into this soft spot between the Union 16th and 17th Corps. And, well, we got a crisis here for the Union Army of Tennessee. They now have Confederate forces in their rear. This is what Hood was intending to start the battle with. Although it's taken some time, we're now starting to see the first breach into the Union battle line. And around this time, James McPherson is going to he's going to come down from his headquarters. He's going to ride into this L, the fork in the L, to try to rally his men together to assess the situation. But he goes too far forward and kind of rides right into the ranks of these Texan soldiers as they pour in and outflank McPherson's own men. And there is a definitely awkward moment where the Texans demand for McPherson to surrender. And McPherson says, I have no intentions of surrendering, salutes the Texans, and tries to get the heck out of Dodge. No, not the Corps Commander Dodge, the 16th Corps. Unfortunately, as he's riding away, the Texans open fire. McPherson is shot through the back, knocked off his horse, and kind of left for dead on the battlefield. The rest of his staff is rounded up as prisoners. The Texans continue advancing, trying to take advantage of the breach they've made. Now, as these Texans move a little bit, we'll get back to McPherson. As he moves a little bit farther, the Texans, they're going to bump into more Union reinforcements. This is going to be, if I can pronounce that right, Wengelin's Brigade? Yeah, Wengelin's Brigade, who are coming from the 15th Corps, which are all the way on the right flank of the Army of Tennessee. So they're, like about 2 miles north of where the fighting's occurring. They come running in. They try to plug this gap. They're also going to rally some of the elements of the 17th Corps together. I also wanted to mention that there's going to this moment, I believe it's the 64th Illinois, who they're over on that Peach, they're over on that, did I keep saying Peach Creek? I'm sorry. Spruce Creek. Sugar Creek. Crap, what's wrong with my glasses? Sugar Creek. It's not Peach Creek. Peach Creek happened 2 days ago. The Union extreme left is on Sugar Creek redoubt. All right, I got that. To go up a ravine between and below enemy lines is wild. Well, they're doing it because they're essentially what's happened is the 17th Corps, for the most part, they're facing west. And we're going to talk a bit more why they're facing west, because there's a whole other Confederate Corps immediately west of most of the Army of Tennessee's battle line. The idea was that Hardee's Corps, while the 17th and 15th Corps are facing west toward the Confederates defended Atlanta, Hardee's Corps was hoping they could sneak up behind the 17th Corps and the rest of the Army of Tennessee. However, there were some Union defenses that extended more beyond the 17th Corps and were guarding the rear. They weren't enclosed, however, so there were gaps still open in this defense. And that's why the Texans were able to find this breach between two Union Corps. There's just nobody between these two Union Corps, and charge right up the middle, and they take out essentially the Army commander, the Union Army commander. It's crazy what's going on in this battle. The Union Army commander, this 10 point, is out of action. Now, when the Texans get forward, as I mentioned, they're going to bump into a new Union line that's being formed to try to fix the Union left flank, to try to plug the gap. That'll be McNillion's brigade. There's also going to be the 64th Illinois, who are over on the hilltop overlooking Sugar Creek. They see these Texans pouring up the gap. I also want to mention that the 66th and 64th Illinois both had Henry rifles with them at the Battle of Atlanta. And yes, I went into the ordnance records, and I can confirm, yes, the 66th Illinois, they did have Henry rifles, at least during the Atlanta campaign, because I've heard writers claiming they did. It's in the ordnance books. Their reports in June of 1864. They're there. Why is that a big deal? Well, that means they can, as one Confederate put it, that darn Yankee rifle, you can load it and shoot all week. It's the Henry rifle. You keep repeating, you can fire multiple rounds before you have to reload. So here we got some of these Illinois guys who are veterans. They're kind of with their re-enlistment bonus is what got them these high-end repeating rifles. They're going to come charging down from the Sugar Creek Hill right into the flank of the Texans. You got McNillion's brigade up front firing into the front of the Texans, and you got elements of the 17th Corps about facing and firing down into the gap. And that is going to do enough and force the Texans and other elements of Cleburne's division to fall out of the gap. So at this time, this breach around Ball Hill has been sealed. Now, as Union forces reclaim the ground they had just lost a few minutes ago. Yeah, they did. Yeah, you're putting up Texans against Illinois. You're putting up Texans against Chicagoans with Henry's. That's like some fan fiction there, but it reportedly happened during the Battle of Atlanta. What's going to happen is the Union repossessed what the ground they just lost earlier. And a private from one of the regiments, I think it's one of the Iowa regiments, he's actually going to find McPherson on the ground and discovers that he is barely breathing, but is still alive. So they're going to get an ambulance and they're going to carry him off to the nearest hospital, but he'll die before the day is over. So that's why I was delaying on saying he was technically dead. He actually lingered for several hours, but it's the fact that the Texans overran his position and he was just kind of left for dead. And that does make Major General James B. McPherson the second highest ranking Union general killed during the American Civil War, second only after John Sedgwick, who was killed during the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. However, Sedgwick was a Corps commander. McPherson, to my knowledge, I've heard people say he's the only Union Army commander killed during the American Civil War. Though I do question about Nathaniel Lyon, who was killed at the Battle of Wilson's Creek, albeit Lyon's 5,000 Union soldiers versus, McPherson's, like 20,000 Union soldiers. Those are two very different armed forces. So he's one of at the very least, we can say, with all the controversy, Major General James B. McPherson, who's killed at the Battle of Atlanta, is one of the highest ranking officials killed during the American Civil War. And we also lost Confederate General Walker just a few moments ago. So both of these high ranking officials, one on either side, killed in the early phases of this battle. And it's not over yet, folks. But to finish up Hardee's attack, which was the intended goal of the Battle of Atlanta, Hardee's 4 divisions are going to keep trying to press the initiative. They're trying to find a new gap in the bottom portion of the L. So think of the 15th to 17th Corps being the stem, and then you got the L down here. This is the 16th Corps and vestiges of other units that are trying to plug the gap. And it's like Hardee's thrown himself at the base of the L for the rest of the day. And though he's able to get himself on Bald Hill a couple times, at least him, I mean his soldiers, they're driven off repeatedly all the way through nightfall. So this ground is fought over all into the night. So fierce fighting here on the left flank of the Army of the Tennessee. However, around 3 p.m., General Hood is going to change his strategy. Seeing that Hardee, for the most part, is being stalled and that there were, in fact, Union soldiers on the left flank guarding the Union left flank, he wonders if that means the right flank of the Army of Tennessee is weak. He theorizes that maybe all of them reinforcements that showed up where I thought there'd be no Union soldiers, maybe that means they've left a gap somewhere up the line. So he's going to order the Corps of Benjamin Cheatham to make a full frontal attack on the Union 15th Corps, as well as elements of the Union 17th Corps. So we're going from the fighting down here on the bottom of the L. We're now going to the fighting up here on its stem. This is why I said the 17th Corps was looking to the west and why Hood thought he can outflank them, because they were looking at Cheatham's Confederate Corps, who all started moving a little bit after, by 4 o'clock. And they're going to move with pretty darn aggression. Now, initially, the 15th Corps do hold them back, but once reinforcements are rushed up to the front, the Confederates are going to find an opening here. They're going to find a railroad cut. Yes, it wouldn't be a Civil War battlefield without a freaking railroad cut. They're going to find the railroad cut of the Georgia Railroad. Remember, this is the whole point of the battle. The reason we're fighting over Bald Hill is so we can fight over control of the Georgia Railroad, as well as a wagon road that both lead out of Atlanta, Georgia, heading northeast to Decatur, Georgia. So it's going to take some muscle power, but eventually 2 brigades of John Brown's division, that's John Brown's Confederate division, no relation to the abolitionists, are going to go through the railroad cut, and they're going to actually find another weak spot, another gap in the Union line due to a depression in the ground, and they're going to exploit it. So this is another moment in the Battle of Atlanta where a gap in the Union line is discovered by the Confederates, and they breach it open and exploit it. And they're going to come pouring through the railroad cut. You're going to have one Confederate brigade swinging to the left, one Confederate brigade swing to the right, trying to get into the rear of 2 Union divisions. And the threat actually works for a moment. 2 Union divisions are going to be pushed back from their battle lines, from their entrenchments, and they're going to come retreating past. You can see in the painting in the bottom right. That's a depiction of the Troop House, or Troop House, I think it's pronounced. Sometimes it's a Troop Hurt House. My apologies. I don't know why I wrote just Troop House. This is the Troop Hurt House, sometimes misidentified as the Howard House. The Howard House is I think a little bit farther up. That was Sherman's actual headquarters. But the Troop House sits right there, right along the Georgia Railroad. And all these Union soldiers are going to go running past it. And then you're going to have John Brown's division on these heels pursuing. And around the Hurt House, there was actually 4 20-pound Parrott rifles. These are some heavy-duty ordnance that have been harassing Cheatham's corps, as well as shelling the city of Atlanta. So Brown's division actually gets possession of that battery. However, by the time they take possession, they find the Union gunners had already spiked the guns, so they were useless. But they do turn to them around to try to intimidate the Union, because surely the battle has been won. Surely the Union's not going to counterattack. Well, guess what? The 15th Corps is commanded by a man by the name of General Logan, who's known simply as Blackjack on the battlefield. Now, Blackjack Logan is not actually a military commander by trade. He's a politician from Illinois, but at the start of the war, he's going to get himself through political shenanigans into a very affluent position of power in the Union Army. However, I wouldn't doubt him. Normally we criticize political generals, especially myself. I'm always a critic of them, but they do have their moments of shine. Like I've said about Hooker, I've defended Hooker on a number of occasions. I've defended, have I defended Dan Sickles? I don't think I've defended Dan Sickles. I don't know. And then again, Joseph Hooker's not like the biggest political leader. Like he's a military leader before the American Civil War, but Hooker was definitely got curmudgeon with a few of the political generals. That's why I tend to throw him in. I know he's not actually a political general, but he had good friends in high places. So he was friends with some political generals. Anyways, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I need to stop talking about Joseph Hooker. Why do I keep want to talk about Joseph Hooker on this channel? I should just make a freaking documentary about him. Oh, dear Lord. Kahuna, thank you very much. Thank you for your humor. All right, on we go. So Blackjack Logan, by no means is he the greatest military mastermind, but man, is he good at winning over the vote. I mean, the people, I mean, the soldiers. So Logan is actually, when he starts seeing the Union line giving around the Hurt House, he is actually going to ride forward personally, and he is actually going to throw himself into the melee to rally his corps to throw a counteroffensive. And behind him will be his aides and will be the other corps commanders and the divisional commanders. They all come right in, and they're going to rally the vestiges of the Union 15th Corps to make a very fierce pushback toward the Hurt House. And after some vicious fighting around 5 p.m. here on the Atlanta battlefield, the Logan's 15th Corps will recapture the Hurt House and throw Brown's division back out of the railroad cut, sealing the gap. And now there will be more sparring for the rest of the evening. Like I mentioned, elements of Hardee's Corps are going to still throw themselves at Bald Hill through nightfall. You're going to have Cheatham's Corps trying to find a way to find another gap. And there's a lot of controversy at this moment that says at this hour, since Cheatham had actually found a bigger breach in the Union battle line than Hardee ever could have, that Cheatham had done what Hardee set out to do that day, that technically what Hood had set up to do to kind of destroy a flank of the Army of the Tennessee had been accomplished by almost around 4:30 on July 22nd, that had Stewart's Confederate Corps been diverted to reinforce the battle line here, that perhaps the Army of Tennessee could have been driven off of Hood's back, driven back toward Decatur, driven north, destroyed. There's all sorts of theories over what could have happened to the Army of the Tennessee, the Union Army of the Tennessee, which was once commanded by General McPherson until midday on July 22nd. A lot of theories over what would have happened had Hood ordered Stewart's Corps to join the battle. I'm going to be quite honest with you guys, though obviously I'm no expert on the Battle of Atlanta. This is research I've done over the past 2 days and some prior knowledge I know. Considering it took Hardee a 12-mile march to get into position, to get around the Union left flank, I don't know if Stewart would have been in a better position. He would have had to make he could have probably made the haul. I don't know the exact mileage he was from the scene of battle, but I don't think he's arriving there to do anything on July 22nd. Maybe July 23rd, but I don't know if he really could have done anything effective July 22nd. I think really the fate of this battle was over before it began. The purpose of this attack was so Hardee could completely surround the left flank of the Union Army of the Tennessee. They did not realize that McPherson knew who he was facing. McPherson anticipated what Hood was going to do in some capacity and had already made preparations. They were not complete preparations, and they led to Clayborne's division exploiting a gap at Bald Hill, and it also led to the death of McPherson himself. But McPherson had guessed what Hood was going to do. He was going to do something wild, something reckless, something aggressive on July 22nd, and by moving elements of the 16th Corps, that kind of sealed the fate of what was going to happen to the Confederate Army that day. Everything else that happens is just theater. Cheatham's Corps was meant to support. They weren't, there was, I don't know if there was ever a chance that they were going to successfully stay in that breach for that long. It's kind of like a Pickett's charge situation. Yeah, a few hundred of them actually made it to the Union line, but were they really going to do anything once they got there? It's like, great, you moved the entire Confederate battle line right into the front of the Union. Now what? So in any case, we could be here all day debating over could Hood have exploited the breach he created at the Hurt House? Could he have done some severe damage to the Army of the Tennessee and thwarted Sherman's plans to besiege Atlanta? We're not going to be able to answer any of those. What we know happens is, as darkness settles over the battlefield, Hood's going to call off the attack, thus ending what has been erroneously called the Battle of Atlanta. Again, this is not the battle that ends the siege of Atlanta, not by a long shot. The reason it is called the Battle of Atlanta, however, it's that it's the bloodiest battle that happens around the city. 3,700 Union casualties are incurred during this attack. The Confederates suffer 5,500 casualties trying to get this attack to work. It's a Union victory at the end of the day, a bloody one, but it is a Union victory as they thwart Hood's strategy of outflanking the Union Army of the Tennessee. The Union remain in possession of the Georgia Railroad and the route to Decatur, which means the Confederacy has only one more efficient line to supply themselves, which means I kid you not, you got to have to bring the supplies. Like, you have to either like bring them, from Savannah on the coast for blockade. You're going to bring them overland to Decatur. Then you're going to kind of have to take some back roads because the Union are blocking the railroad. So you can bring them up roads on the south side of Atlanta or load them onto the last railroad that's still standing, the Macon and Western Railroad that's actually moving southwest out of the city. It's a very convoluted supply network. Also, you still have Mobile Bay down there, which is under some serious fire by the Union in 1864, which, man, the Battle of Mobile Bay is a story unto itself. So, there's that narrow window in Mobile Bay. Of course, you have the Union blockade around all of the Confederacy, but then blockade runners, especially at the first half of the war, they did a pretty decent job evading the Union blockaders. Confederate blockade runners, they did a somewhat decent job. And what I'm trying to say is, folks, the Battle of Atlanta on July 22nd, not much had really changed in the immediate aftermath. The Sherman and the Union Army have their hands on two supply arteries into Atlanta. One more supply artery remains standing, and that is the Macon and Western Railroad. Now, before Sherman can target the Macon and Western Railroad, he does have to deal with probably as the most consequential setback of the Battle of Atlanta, at least for the Union fighting force, and that is the loss of General McPherson. They have to replace an army commander. Well, there was much talk over who's going to replace the Army commander for the Army of the Tennessee. I know I wrote Army of Tennessee. I told you, we started to stream early because I could already feel myself getting winded. Just been a weird, I think it's just like the humidity or something. I don't know what it was. It was just like midday. I just started going. One of them situations. So Sherman looks at his options. There's Joseph Hooker, who has all but redeemed himself, at least in terms of battlefield capability, since the loss at Chancellorsville. He's done a lot of good during the Western Theater. We've talked about him at Chattanooga. We've talked about him at Kennesaw Mountain. So, yeah, he's done a pretty good bang-up job over leading troops on the battlefield, especially because Sherman's kind of been giving him the hardest assignments to intentionally break him, and Hooker has yet broken. However, there's also, Blackjack Logan. Blackjack Logan's the hero of July 22nd. He personally lead in Union reinforcements to fill the gap at the Hurt House. Well, Sherman doesn't even consider Logan because he's a political general. Doesn't even want to get and you can't blame Sherman on that. Not getting a politician in charge. Fair enough, Sherman. I mean, he was a hero that day, but, He also got a really cool nick. Now, come on, Sherman. He has a really cool nickname, Blackjack. No, he's a politician. We can't trust him. I agree with that, Sherman. And then he's going to turn. I think we have a certain man in the chat who will appreciate this. He's going to turn to Oliver Otis Howard. For the record, if those that aren't in the know in the chat, if you want to know why Ghost of Howard's right arm was called that, General Oliver Otis Howard was actually one-armed during the American Civil War, and he was considered a vapid and pious individual. They kind of called him what they called him, like the Bibler or something like that, or Mr. Bible that's what his like nickname was in the Union Army. He was not a very liked general amongst the soldiers or amongst the officer corps, but he's the most vanilla choice that Sherman can make. You know, the man has been in battles before, doesn't have a great battlefield track record, but he is good at administrative handlings, and he's not going to do any reckless decisions. So for that reason, Sherman decides to appoint Howard the new Army commander of the Army of the Tennessee. For the record, Hooker was pissed and requested a reassignment. So the Battle of Atlanta has very important consequences for the makeup of the Union Army for the remainder of the conflict, because now Howard has an army command against all odds. Yay. And since Howard's now in charge of the Army of the Tennessee, Sherman gives Howard an interesting assignment. He's going to send Howard all the way around the northern outskirts of Atlanta to the western outskirts to finally take out the Macon and Western Railroad. There comes into play the final major supply artery into Atlanta, Georgia. So that's a pretty tough assignment, if you ask me, especially for Howard newly being in Army command. He's going to maneuver the army out of their earthworks that they've dug on July 22nd, where the Atlanta battle we just talked about occurred. Remember, the Battle of Atlanta was just on the eastern side of the city. So now Howard's having to move the Army of the Tennessee, who are pretty banged up after this battle. Even though they won it, they're pretty darn mauled up. Move them on a counter march around the north side of Atlanta to try to cut off the Macon and Western Railroad. Hood is going to recognize the maneuver that's happening, and he's going to divert most of his troops back through the city of Atlanta to get on the western outskirts in time to try to block Howard in what becomes known as the Battle of Ezra Church. This will happen, I think it's July 28th, 1864, about a week after the Battle of Atlanta. We really should just call the Battle of Atlanta the Battle of Bald Hill, because that's what was really over. Doesn't sound as cool, though. Everybody's like, Atlanta, Battle of Atlanta. There's some finality to it. In fact, though, there is no finality. And Bald Hill's the target of it. That's readouts with his battle name pet peeves. In any case, Hood is going to be able to get some Confederate forces at Ezra Church to try to block Hood. Howard gets a pretty bad mauling that day at Ezra Church. Technically, the Union do win, however. They do drive the Confederates off the battlefield. But after the fighting of Ezra Church, and a combination of what happens at Peachtree Creek. Yes, Peachtree Creek. I want to say Peach Creek Tree. That's what I want to say so badly. After the fightings at Peachtree Creek, Bald Hill, and Ezra Church, both Hood and Sherman are going to decide to enter trenches and lay siege. We're in full-on siege warfare at this point. We're in the waiting game now. However, it ain't going to be as long of a waiting game as it was up in Petersburg for Grant and Lee. Where the siege of Petersburg goes on for 10 months, this ain't going to last more than 2 months. What's going to happen is Sherman's going to keep some of his Union forces in the trenches, keeping Hood occupied, but he's going to start sending cavalry to raid the southwestern and southeastern countryside around Atlanta, Georgia. And eventually he's going to start moving some troops to follow the cavalry. And this will ultimately lead to the fall of Atlanta by early September of 1864, when the last rail line is severed at Jonesboro. And that's really a story for another day, because I think we'll do a stream about Jonesboro as well as the burning of Atlanta itself, because the burning of Atlanta is such a fascinating story unto itself. But that's the aftermath of the fighting around Bald Hill, which was our main focus of tonight's stream. It's known erroneously, though, as the Battle of Atlanta. This was not the battle ended Atlanta. In fact, you can see Atlanta has greatly grown since 1864. So the Bald Hill battlefield, there is none. At least there's none preserved. as I mentioned at the start of our stream tonight, where all this action occurred that we described during the stream, this is all covered up by modern development. There are a couple markers where the fighting roughly occurred, including markers to McPherson and Walker, where they roughly died. You'll see McPherson's monument on the left, Walker's on the right. You'll notice they're not the best taken care of. It's the fighting around Bald Hill, for as massive it was. I mean, I think we had upwards, combining both forces, I think we had upwards of like 60,000 troops on the battlefield. Like, this was a big firefight. I think that's right? Because there's 20,000. Yeah, now I'm debating myself. Oh, wow, 40, 56, 70. More like 75,000 if you go by the numbers from the American Battlefield Trust. Darn. It's a big battle, what I'm saying. It's one of the biggest battles. It's the bloodiest battle of the Atlanta campaign. And that's why it deserves to be remembered. Just for the sheer loss of life, all of those lives cut short due to this attempted flanking maneuver by Hood that failed. Although, when I say in a spectacular manner, I don't mean that it was off, completely did not work, as in it completely blew up in a fireworks show that nobody was expecting. So sadly, there's nothing really preserved from it. There's nothing, none of the battlefield's preserved. You can't go explore the site of Bald Hill. It's mostly overlooked compared to other large battles of the American Civil War. However, it has been preserved in Ott. Yes, we're going to talk about Ott. But first, I need some water. And holy crap, you guys, I am indebted to you guys. Thank you guys for supporting this stream. We have been getting a number of super chats. So before we talk about the Atlanta Cyclorama, which is really the second half of our program tonight, I want to first shout out Maji Chan. She dropped $2. Keep up the good work. She has been supporting the channel for well over a year now. It is all the ultimate kahuna. Don't like listening to her. And now they're going back and forth in a super chat fight. I heard listening to this Maji person could be bad. But possibly. I hopefully not. But that does deserve some of these. That's free monies. Free monies. You weren't expecting that. I don't think I've ever done triple money in a row. Ultimate Kuna did ask, how many troops and how long did a 12-mile hike take? So Hardy's Corps that actually did the hike itself initially had 14,000 soldiers. Only 9,000 soldiers actually went into the fight. So that shows you they lost about a quarter of their men due to attrition from how painful that march was that night. And it started around the evening hours of July 21st, and they were not into position until 11 a.m. on July 22nd. So it took about, you're looking at about an hour a mile. They didn't have the best guides. They didn't have the best maps, and they were kind of walking through the woods. Not the best thing, not the best place to be in. And Ghost of Howard's right arm reminds us that, yes, his namesake was indeed a stick in the mud. I do agree with this. And Wrangler, of course, drops in some of his famous 420. You guys have more cool old military shit than us on the West Coast. I have not been on the West Coast, so I can't comment. Now Maji did share a lovely series of fortifications that are preserved around ports up in Oregon and Washington. We were talking about them. And it was Washington, wasn't it? We were talking about them during our Christmas stream several months back. Christmas, a happier time before our country looked like it was about to implode. And this, you see the painting here? Yeah, Civil War again. And then Maji drops in, what's your opinion on the Liberty Bell vandalism? I did not know that the Liberty Bell was vandalized. When did that occur? And I'm going to assume it was by them. If it was by one of them, what do you want to call them, anti-oil people, I don't know what their technical term is, environmental terrorists, whatever they were. I did a video months back when they tried to vandalize the U.S. Constitution. You're more than willing to go check that out. Was that the Constitution or Declaration of Independence? I don't remember. They're not worth my time and energy, to be quite honest. I made a video about vandals dropping orange paint on some very valuable U.S. documents. I have a whole video about my opinion on them. By all means, check that out. I don't have the time and energy for those people. They're auction thieves, in my humble opinion. Not you, Maji. You're just fine. You're not the auction thief, but the people that spend all their lives destroying things, they may be auction thieves. All right, so the Battle of Atlanta, the painting, made in 1886. Now, we've talked a few months back, man, we're getting to the point now that the Library for Uncut History, I'm like, remember that edition of the live stream? Remember that live stream? We talked about the Gettysburg Cyclorama. So we talked a bit about the history of cyclorama then. I'm not going to go too in detail about it now. In short, in the late 19th, early 20th century, the IMAX theater of that time period were cycloramas, which were 360-degree paintings, which have a hyperbolic shape. They look like an hourglass, and that's intentional. The viewing platform's in the middle of the hyperbolic shape, and where you are standing, the viewer, your eyes are at the closest point of the painting, and it creates a 3D optical illusion as if the painting is actually moving, that you are in the moment. And cycloramas were very popular to depict historical events, recent historical events, including American Civil War and Indian Wars were depicted in cycloramas. Sadly, only 2 of those survive in the United States of America today. One of them is on display in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and depicts Pickett's charge during the Battle of Gettysburg, which I have got to see on multiple occasions, and it is a phenomenal experience. If you're in Gettysburg, you must see the Gettysburg Cyclorama. There is another, however, and that is the cyclorama for the Battle of Atlanta. That's right. This battle, where there's no battlefield preserved of it today, is carried on in the visual memory of this beautiful piece of artwork. It was done in 1886 by the American Panorama Company of Wisconsin. It was painted by a team of a dozen German artists, and initially it was exhibited in all places, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I think it was done intentionally. You have to understand that these cycloramas, there were cyclorama buildings that operate like movie theaters today. So cycloramas were built kind of to the same specifications so they can travel around from cyclorama building to cyclorama building. But this one started in the Midwest because, well, a lot of the soldiers involved in the Battle of Atlanta for the Union side were from the Midwest. I've talked about Iowa. I've talked about Illinois. I've talked a bit about, I don't think I have them. There were Wisconsin troops. There was all these different groups of troops that were all part of the Army of the Tennessee. So they wanted to represent all of those Western troops. Like, hey, the Midwestern Union veterans, they want to go see what they feel is one of the biggest victories for their part of the war. Like many people who are Union veterans in the Eastern Theater want to see how they turn the tide of Pickett's charge. So that's why there's an Atlanta cyclorama being made in Wisconsin and being displayed in Minnesota. So it's initially opened in 1886. Rave reviews on par with the Gettysburg Cyclorama, what people were seeing. And then something interesting is going to happen, which is going to kind of start an unfortunate trend with the Atlanta Cyclorama. In 1888, a alteration was made because Benjamin Harrison was running for election in 1888, and it was decided by his election committee to go in there and paint Benjamin Harrison on the Atlanta cyclorama, even though he was obviously not at the Battle of Atlanta. And there were cries later after Harrison got elected and by the way, Harrison got elected not through the popular vote. He got elected through the Electoral College, which was highly controversial. It was one of them moments where the college won over the popular vote, and everyone's like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, we have an electoral college and there's a reason for it. Look it up look it up, do your government civics. So yeah, there is this whole drama of when Harris got elected that, well, he's still in the valor of soldiers. To be technical, Benjamin Harrison was a veteran of the American Civil War, but he did not necessarily serve in this particular, well, he did serve in this battle, but he really should not have been the painting type deal. It was one of them situations. So it's not really stolen valor because he served in the Civil War and he was part of the Atlanta campaign. But where he's actually painted, they superimposed him like over a reporter who was there during the battle that's in the painting. It's a long story. So Harrison was put in the painting. People got upset about it. This was really beginning a trend of altering the cyclorama. In 1892, The cyclorama is going to be acquired by a Paul Atkinson, who's going to move it to Atlanta, Georgia for exhibition. And Atlanta, Georgia, since it's being moved to the South, Mr. Atkinson wanted to make this friendly to the South. And he decided that this could not depict the Union victory at the Battle of Atlanta. For the record, this painting depicts Blackjack Logan's counterattack at the Hurt House. Instead, it should depict a Confederate victory. Now, how do you pick the Confederate victory when historically the Confederates lost? I don't effing know, but Atkinson tried to do it. And he did this by altering certain uniform colors in the painting. Like, hey, you see this row of Confederate prisoners being ushered to the rear of the Union line? Now they're Union soldiers being running away and being chased by a few Confederate soldiers. Crap like that. So the new Atlanta cyclorama showing the Confederate victory at Atlanta. I guess apparently we did not watch the past hour of this live stream. Goes on exhibit to rave reviews. Noticing the trend here. And it'll deteriorate over time as it's on display. And in the 1930s, the city of Atlanta are going to contact Wilbur Kurtz, who's actually a technical advisor for Gone with the Wind, and ask, hey, this big movie's coming out. It's going to show Atlanta and the American Civil War. We're hoping we can get people to come back to see our old beat up cyclorama because it's starting to stain. It's just been sitting in a building for like 40 years now. Could you come in with your artistic capabilities and restore it? So Kurtz accepts, and he comes in and restores it. And by restore it, I mean he converts the St. Andrew cross flags, which no, we don't know why there are St. Andrew crosses. Like, I'm not talking about the Confederate battle flag St. Andrew's cross. I'm talking about like the Spanish St. Andrew's cross, like the red and white, the Georgia flag. That may be the reason why it's in. There's like 15 different. Not the Georgia flag, the Florida flag. Jesus, I'm having a rough day. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. You know what I'm talking about? The Florida flag. It has the red and white St. Andrew's cross, and I think it's supposed to be inspired by the Spanish rule over Florida for many years. Anyways, there's like 15 of these St. Andrew crosses throughout the painting. And historians still don't know why that's in there and not like another battle flag. It's just really strange. So in any case, he's going to go over them and he's going to put on Confederate battle flags, particularly in the variant of the naval jack, which was a very popular symbol, not just for, Southern pride, but, also a certain group with free Ks. And they're quite popular around this time. So, maybe not the best show. And he's also going to add on clay figurines at the base of the cyclorama because he feels it'll make it more immersive. And I was recently reading, I think those were made by the WP, like workers of the WPA, which I just find interesting. And when it's revealed in 1939, it goes on display around the same time Gone with the Wind comes out, so it's kind of like a double feature deal. Gone with the Wind, the Civil War movie with no battle. And it's supposed to be set in Atlanta during the battle. There's no actual fighting, though. Well, I mean, there's the city gets burned in it. Well, I'm going to go straight forward for you guys. I know many people adore Gone with the Wind. It's just boring to me. I actually have a collector copy up here. I'm very proud to have it. It's like a limited edition, but I have it more as the Civil War in me than the Civil War interest in me than, oh, this is a beautiful work of art. It's very boring. It's not of this time. It's not for me. It's not for me. If it's for you, that's great. So technical advisor Gone with the Wind restored the Atlanta cyclorama, though he does his own edits to it and adds on these figurines. And a very interesting story that when it exhibits, Clark Gable actually comes to see the new cyclorama. And Clark Gable, when somebody asks him, like, well, what do you think? And he's like, the only thing that would make it better if I was in it myself. Well, Kurtz made sure he was in it and made another clay figure of Clark Gable's likeness, and to this day you can go to the Atlanta cyclorama and see a deceased Clark Gable in a Union uniform on the floor of the Atlanta cyclorama. It's just awesome. But it'll be on display for many years in the middle of the Atlanta Zoo, essentially, in a old marble building, or granite, I guess you say. I don't know, by rocks. I don't know. I got to pull the clip up. I'm starting to talk about rocks now. Not good when I talk about rocks.
Yeah, geography.
Geology.
Yeah, well, actually, seismology.
So it sits there all the way through into the 21st century. And by this point, how the cyclorama show works, you don't even get to stand in the middle of it. You're actually it's like a Jurassic Park experience where you sit in this theater and the chairs in the theater move, and you move from a movie that shows you the Battle of Atlanta. And then as I take my microphone around, you pivot around, and then you get to see the cyclorama in a slow spin. So you don't get to see it all at once. So that's how it was set up around 2011 when there were talks of moving it to a better location and to restore the painting to its 1886 appearance or as close as they could. This was inspired by how they restored the Gettysburg Cyclorama. In 2015, the Atlanta Cyclorama was taken from Grant Park, where the zoo in the city is, and moved over to the Atlanta History Center, where underwent a multi-year renovation where they tried to the best of their abilities to restore it, bring the color back into the faded painting, restore the figurines. The figurines that Kurtz created are still kept with the painting. They're also going to try their best to, take off some of the, take off them make them Confederates Yankees and Yankees Confederates again, stuff like that. They're going to try to restore it to the best of their abilities as they feel it appeared when it first premiered in 1886. And the restored cyclorama opens in 2019, where it's still on display to this day. And I hope one day I get to go see it, because just like the Gettysburg Cyclorama, it is a beautiful work of art. But before we finish up tonight's stream, I'm going to jump on over tonight's gibberish stream. I always gibberish on the stream. I'm going to jump over and show you the website from the Atlanta History Center. They have a whole, I guess you want to call it a virtual exhibit about the cyclorama. A little bit about this here. 138-year-old hand-painted work of art standing 49 feet tall, longer than a football field, and weighs 10,000 pounds. It's one of only 2 cycloramas left in the country, the other being Gettysburg, making it one of the largest treasures in the United States of America. It talks more about the history. We'll go through briefly. I wish it would give this is supposed to give me a full perspective, but for whatever reason, it just cuts off midway through. So you're kind of really seeing the top half of the paintings. So I encourage you after the stream, please go and check out, just type in Atlanta Cyclorama and look at different panels. It is just gorgeous. I got to be honest, as much as I love the Gettysburg Cyclorama, just seeing this, I may like this one a bit better. It's pretty cool. You can see the railroad cut we're talking about, that Brown's division found a gap through in the Union 15 Corps. You can see there in the bottom left corner a representation of the Hurt House. You can even see at the bottom there some of the Parrott rifled guns. Yeah, it's a beautiful work of art. And they're looking up there. If you look in the far left corner, you're going to see you may see some horses, some guys by tree line. Reportedly, William Tecumseh Sherman's actually painted up here as well. In the bottom right corner, I don't know if you see in the ambulance over there, the white carriage, that's actually McPherson's body being taken to Sherman's headquarters. A lot of cool details in this. And they have a very interactive exhibit. Something that's interesting about this one. So the Gettysburg Cyclorama, you go up an escalator and you go into the very middle. And that is done because that was done how it was historically set up. Historically, how a cyclorama building set up, you come in from the bottom, then work your way up. But there were cheats. One, the cheats were to save on cost. What they would do, instead of having to dig underground and build a staircase up into the middle of the painting, sometimes they would commission the painting to intentionally have a gap in one corner to make a doorway. So this cyclorama retains that gap in the doorway. So that's no destruction of the painting. That's just how that's how it was designed to be exhibited, that you would walk right out into the middle of the painting instead of rising up into the middle of the painting. So they have a very unique multimedia presentation too. I've seen some YouTube rips of it. Essentially, they talk about the history of the cyclorama painting, a far more intelligent and coherent version than I've just given you, of course, that tells you about the different iterations the cycloramas have gone through over the years. And the reason I bring it up, because it is kind of like we were talking about all these different changes done to the paint. It's like a little bit of form of vandalism, maybe not to the extent of, throwing paint at the Liberty Bell, but still changing you're warping the story. We're going to put Benjamin Harris, we're going to superimpose him over here. And we're going to go over here. And then, we want to make the Confederates the victors, even though they lost the battle. We want us to win. And then, let's add Clark Gable in there. Why not? You're kind of you're warping the story. You're warping the history. Yeah. It's huge. Biggest cyclogram I ever saw in my life. Even though I've never been to Atlanta, I never saw it in my life. But it's the biggest. I promise. It's huge. And yeah. Gettysburg Cycle Mama. Oh, dear Lord. East Coast, a place with bad politics. Do you really want to go off that? You want to talk up that rabbit tree there, buddy? What's a rabbit tree? I don't know. I'm going 100% dead on Ghost. Oh, West Coast. Beautiful place of horrible politics. 100% dead on Ghost. Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's see. Did I miss anything else? But you have way more traditional trains. Now, you see, all the cool historical train collections are on the east side of Pennsylvania, even though I feel the west side is far more important to railroad history. So I got to go drive at least, I got to go at least an hour if I want to go see a steam train, and that's if it's operating. Most of the stuff's east of the Susquehanna River, and that infuriates me. But we're going to wind down. Hey, thank you for tuning in, Kahuna. I'm glad you enjoyed the show. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, warts and all. And if you're watching this and I flub up or get a historical fact wrong, just understand that this just repeat to yourself that this is a show, and you really should just relax and enjoy Mystery Science Feeder. Oh, no, we're not on Mystery Science Feeder Free Files, and we're on an Uncut History. It's, I try my best. We're doing it live, uncut, uncensored. Things are bound to get wrong. Things are bound to get jumbled in the mess, in the noggin up here, which is usually a mess. So I try my best to do the research, but I'm a human being. Nothing can be perfect. I don't know, man. It's a tree where rabbits live in. I don't know. See, Andrew Jackson confirms with you, Kahuna. And see, if Andrew Jackson says it, it cannot be wrong. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a great stream today. We got to talk about the Battle of Atlanta, but keep in mind the Atlanta campaign did not actually end with the titular battle. There's much more fighting going to occur. And of course, there's the infamous burn of Atlanta and the wondrous march to the sea. Huzzah. We get to cover that before this year's over, most likely. Still don't think you understand what I meant by the second comment. Second comment. The flag is bound by. Okay. My brain, look, I must apologize, sir. You're dealing with a very, very brain dead readout right now, Burnett. Thank you for your support. But there's a reason we started to stream early. Are you trying to do the Confederate version of the Battle Cry of Freedom? Or I truthfully don't know. I'm assuming that's what you're trying to do. Oh, great. He's going to make me research that. Confederate Battle Cry. I don't sing the Confederate version. That's the fake version. Just like the Confederate version, Dixie is the fake version. The Union one's the real one. All right. Oh, really? Union course. Where's the Confederate? Did he have Confederate course? Oh, yeah. Okay, yes, he's doing the Confederate Battle Cry of Freedom. Okay, I vaguely thought that's what he was doing. Okay, Burnett. Okay, yep, you got. Okay, no, thank you for. Hey, you made. I think by you calling me out on that, you actually made an electron go between my brain cell. Like that probably hasn't happened in the past 5 hours. So I appreciate that. And Nick is tuning in to say cool string. Lyrically superior, yes, but it's the song of traitors. Oh, come on. We're going to be here all night. We're going to be here all night going back and forth. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this stream, be sure to hit the like button before you depart tonight. If you want to leave a comment down below, let me know what your thoughts are about the Battle of Atlanta, about General Hood, about General McPherson, General Sherman, about the wonders of the Confederate Battle Cry of Freedom. Let me know in the comment section below what your thoughts on all those things are and more. If you want to follow us in our future adventures, consider subscribing here to Readout Productions. Yeah, Lions was not I'm not gonna deny there. Lyons is, yeah, he was a tough SOB. Didn't make friends in Missouri. I will agree with you on that one. Not necessarily a fan of all that he did. But if you want to follow us in our future adventures, consider subscribing here to Readout Productions. And guess what, everybody? We got a new edition of Retracing History. It's going live this Saturday around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be very different from what we normally talk about. It's actually going to be about the movie I got to go see today, but I actually got to see today. I watched for the second time this Thursday afternoon. Watched it for the first time last Friday night at a drive-in theater. So this edition of Retracing History is themed around drive-in movie theaters and twisters. It's going to be fun, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time whenever we stream again here on Uncut History. Let me just get this all regrounded. Got to find a better way to do this. All right, guys. Have a good night.
Down with the traitors, up with the stars. We will reel around the flag. Boys don't really want a game. Shouting a battle cry of freedom. Springing to the goal of your brothers born before, shouting the battle cry of freedom, and we'll come from the ranks with a million free more.